war faction was the vice president, the director of national intelligence, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which was consistent with what happened 23 years earlier when we made a decision to attack Iraq, right? And then people jumped all over me. And they said, oh, we're supposed to believe that people with security clearances and access to the White House are just going to walk up to John Kiriakou, a convicted criminal leaker, and they're going to volunteer classified information. Yes, that's what we want you to believe, because that's what happens literally every single day. I'm not a moron. There are a lot of people who trust my judgment in Washington, and yes, some of them have security clearances and access to the White House. Another thing that I said on your show that day was, if there was one important lesson I learned at the CIA, is that if you want to understand American war planning, watch the movement of naval assets. If we send an aircraft carrier strike force, that's a strong message. If we send 2 or more, we're going to war. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So, and some more color there, by the way, because again, this was very different from, there's been a few stories that accidentally get broken on my show, and afterwards I'm like, oh wow, this was a first. So, because you do a lot of interviews and stuff, and you're always all over the place. So I'm gonna take you back to when you came here, because it was literally right before. But you walked in the door, after driving up, you're sitting in a lot of traffic, and you're like, God damn it, we're going to Iran. I was like, what? You're like, yeah, no, I got this is up. And we start talking about it, and then I'm like, damn, it's crazy. We can't talk about that. And you're like, I'm doing it. I'm like, on air? And you're like, yeah.
Yeah,
and I'm
let's
like,
do it.
All right, we'll save that for the end. Let's do it. But then you and I, off the record, talked about like your sourcing and all that. And the thing, by the time you had gotten to me, the thing that you were shocked about was that anti-war faction, which had consistently, we weren't breaking news on this respect, it had consistently seemed to, based on previous reporting by other people, consisted of exactly what you said, Gabbard, Vance, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. By this time, your guy was like, yeah, they got the Joint Chiefs aren't like crazy, but like they're now on board with it. And the only holdouts were Vance and Gabbard, which that, to me, like when I was thinking about it afterwards, I'm like, okay, so these guys were totally against this for the longest time, and now they're on board, which tells me they're not on board at all. They've just been pressured into doing this by, and now I'd speculate, by other people who are not on that, but let's say around those conversations. And who are those people? Because then that's exactly what happened,
Right.
and we saw these people go. And you know what? There was this side point. There was one part of your report, and I remember telling you this, where I'm like, I don't think that part's going to happen, because we were recording on a Friday. We ended up going into Iran a Friday evening. We ended up going into Iran basically almost exactly a week later, in the middle of the night, Friday, Saturday, right?
Yep.
And one part of your report was that they said they were going to do it on Monday or Tuesday.
4 days. That's
and I'm thinking they're not going to do that because the State of the Union's happening. I don't think you would do that before that. However, you might have actually, and this is pure spec, we'll never know, you might have even gotten that right, if not for the fact that the same time we were recording, when we got out of the recording, Tucker dropped that interview with Mike Huckabee where he very casually said, yeah, Israel can have the whole Middle East as far as I'm concerned, which caused a diplomatic crisis in the whole Middle East, and might have delayed any planning. So I don't know, but I was blown away by the flip of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So to get back to your original question, as far as like what is causing this, again, I told you, I look at actions and words that we all can see, open source intel. And when you have on the same day separate, and I saw these in context, separate admissions of the Speaker of the House, who's a very weak guy,
yes,
and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, saying that the United States decided to attack because they knew Israel was going, is an admission that Israel was taking this into their own hands. Now, here's the contrary point to that as well, which doesn't change the overall symbolism here, but Israel has reportedly, according to other administration officials, believe them or not, I don't know, in the past threatened this many times with presidents, like, well, if you don't do it, we're going to go.
Many
and presidents
times.
always said, knock yourself out.
Yes.
And then they never went. So maybe this is the first time they were able to bluff their way into it. I don't know. But when I see that, and then I see what that government is doing under the cover of this war. Now, as we're talking, they're supposedly getting to a 10-day ceasefire with Lebanon, which I'm very much rooting for. I hope that is the case. But, like, we watched the defense minister, Katz, and the finance minister, Smotrich, who's a nut job. We talked about him forever.
Dangerous. Yes.
Openly discussed the minute they went in and attacked Lebanon under the guise of this whole Iran chaos, openly discussed seizing the land up to the Litani River and never giving it back. And then they even went to the Druze and the Christians in the area and gave them a heads up, which is cool, and said, like, hey, you know, maybe you can come back and say, cool. If not for the fact that it was them telling them, by the way, the majority population, the Shiites, if you know where they are, tell us, because we're getting them the And I just say, I'm like, you know, you and I have talked about before, a minority amount of people in Israel voted for this government because there's so many parties over there.
And then minority.
Right. And they almost had a civil war right before October 7th because people were in the streets. So a lot of people don't support this. But, like, when you see what the current government is doing, you cannot help but think it's not a lot different from what Hitler did taking land. It's very, very parallel. Replace the word Shiites with Jews and replace the Israeli government with Germany. And you are seeing some of the same themes. Get out of this land. This is ours now. You know, we're expelling you from it. And, like, if they want to take out some Hezbollah guys, fine. But you and I both know, you've said it before, you put it beautifully. It's like, they'll take out a whole city block to get one guy.
Yeah, they will.
And you think this isn't going to cause bad PR? I don't think that's the case. I think I think the guys in power just don't care. And so I've said forever, I'm like, I'm a common sense thinker. I've always called for regime change in Iran, just not forced regime change. I've called for the people there to rise up and handle it because I feel bad for them. They've lived under a horrible regime for 47 years. You know, the same thing in Israel. Vote these guys out.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like, get rid of them.
I went back and looked. You and I talked about this. Benjamin Netanyahu has never won more than 27% in an Israeli election. He's the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history, and he's never won more than 27% because there are so many political parties in Israel. This is not just a minority government, but it's a small minority government. And yet he carries so much authority in the United States. George Galloway, the British parliamentarian, commented last week, said something that was so funny because it was true. There were rumors that Netanyahu was dead, Netanyahu was hiding in Germany, Netanyahu was hiding in Cyprus, he was hiding in a bunker somewhere in Israel. And George Galloway said, Netanyahu's missing. Who's running the United States? It's leaderless.
This is the thing. If any other leader in the world shit on Trump the way that Benjamin Netanyahu puckers up and shits on Trump's face over and over again, he would be throwing a fit online. He would cut off all trade. He would tariff the shit out of that country. He might be wild enough to declare war.
Yeah.
Yet over and over and over and over again, these guys referring to Israel's government, defy the American wishes and demonstrate that they have no interest in peace. You know, you saw that March 23rd True Social on that Monday morning from Trump talking about agreeing to a ceasefire. Let me correct that. Agreeing to a ramping down in some hostilities. It was not a ceasefire with Iran. And at the time it was, I'm trying to remember, maybe it was 5 days or something like that. And he specifically referred to their energy infrastructure and one other type of infrastructure related to that. Within the hour, the Israeli Air Force tweeted out, "We have begun a brand new round of campaigns specifically at what infrastructure, which doesn't mean energy infrastructure,
That's right.
but then go look at the timeline and look at the shit they blew up. They blew up energy infrastructure.
Yes,
They
they
blew up
did.
like they blew up a gas pipeline and shit like that.
That
They said,
that was
fuck
an
you.
open palm smack across the face of
Yes.
Donald Trump. Yeah. So
And
let me.
you
I'm sorry.
have to ask
Go ahead.
yourself, why do they have that kind of power over him? This is a small nation.
Yeah.
They should never have that kind of influence over a leader like ours. And I would say that about any country, and I have.
Yes, you're exactly right. So I think you and I are both of the agreement, or or of the position that this is going to have to be resolved through diplomacy. Whether
Yes.
the Iranian government survives or not, I personally believe that it will survive, but diplomats are going to have to settle this thing. So how does the U.S. balance deterrence and diplomacy, especially given the risks around oil routes like the Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one you'd have a lot. I mean, you have life experience with this. I don't. If I were looking at it from strictly an outside view of like power dynamics and how humans work, on the one hand, well, unfortunately now it would appear, and we don't know this for sure because there's all kinds of misinformation in any war.
Yes.
But it would appear that the very lowly supported Iranian government now at least has more support than it did on February 27th.
Yes,
all right. Now,
indeed.
whether or not that's 10% more or 5%, I don't know. But the fact is, if anything, you've just strengthened them a little bit because people are like, why the bombing me? Right?
Yeah.
So that's a problem. Secondly, I'm not going to be one of these guys who, no matter what our leaders do, I'm just going to make sure I shit on them. If Donald Trump has to go make an about face, and without him admitting it verbally, because he never will, basically admit a mistake / defeat and pull out and cut your losses and try to rebuild what you've unnecessarily torn down in the last 8 weeks, I will credit him for that, because that will be swallowing the pride and doing the harder thing for at least trying to salvage something. There's an old quote in poker where it's like, don't throw good money after bad.
Yes.
Just because you've put X number of chips in the pot, by the time the turn gets down, doesn't mean you should pay for the river.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just a human psychology thing in life. And Trump is a guy who wants to see the river card every single time. And you're just unnecessarily dealing with things. Like, I hate it when people put words in my mouth or take words out of my mouth. There is no one with a sane brain, starting with me in this case, who is in any way advocating for the people that run Iran or denying what they are. In fact, we don't even know the numbers of people they killed. I'll believe it. If you say it was 45,000, I'll buy it because they've done it before. Fine. I don't care. It's a subject I don't need to fight over. Like, they're bad. There are, unfortunately, though, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 10th order effects of things that you do.
Exactly right.
And if we wanted to be the world's police on everything, then you know what we would do, John? We would go invade China tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you noticed, they're killing the Uyghurs.
Right.
Of course you know that.
Yeah.
But why don't we do that, John? Because they have a fucking $20 trillion GDP that we know of, allegedly. Right. And that's just not how the world works. Do I like that they do that? No, I hate it. And they do more than that as well.
And for that matter,
you can't just walk into Iran and be like, you know what? We're going to change the regime today.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
For that matter, why don't we invade Saudi Arabia?
Exactly.
For the way they treat their people. And and that's not a democratic society. If we're so interested in democracy all around the world, let's invade Saudi Arabia.
Yep. You're same point. Exactly.
Yep.
And it's just the fact that people can't see that. Like, we talk about Afghanistan since the times of Alexander the Great being where empires fall because of the geography and the location.
Right.
Iran's worse. Every single part of their border is a problem. They got 92, 93 million people there.
That's right.
The people most advocating for war as of last year didn't even know what the population was there. Hello, Ted Cruz. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, we're talking about you, Ted Cruz.
But like, this is, what world are we living in where Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Mark Levin, these are the people winning Trump's ear?
Yeah.
I don't buy that.
Yeah.
There's more to it. I don't buy that. Like, people love to call Trump an idiot. He's not an idiot.
He's not.
He's not.
No, and see, the Democrats...
why is he doing idiotic things?
Yeah, the Democrats have consistently underestimated Donald Trump. He's not an idiot.
Yes.
He's very bright.
Yes.
He thinks several steps ahead, but apparently not when it comes to the Israelis. And I just don't understand the hold that Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have over him.
I don't understand it either, and there's so much of it that would just be pure speculation for me to go. Yeah. The one thing that I have said is I'm like, he knew Epstein for a really long time. And that's the thing with Trump, there's still so much haziness there. He was good friends with him and everything.
Yeah.
But he's like the one guy of these powerful people where there's not one email that you can point to and be like, there it is. Like, even some of the FBI cases and stuff that were settled, they were settled by Epstein's estate, like after the fact, which is just closing up business and everything. Like, that unfortunately doesn't mean a lot.
Yes.
Like, when I'm looking at when he was alive, where is it? Now, there's some spec emails, Jeffrey Epstein, very bad guy, when he's calling Donald Trump like the worst guy he's ever known. You wonder if that's just because he hates him or because he knows ball. like I don't know.
Let me add something.
I'm looking into that.
Let me add something to that too. I remember when I was in college, Ronald Reagan was the president when I was in college, and like every president, he had a cabinet, but he had also something called a kitchen cabinet, and this was all of his billionaire friends from California, and they would meet in Reagan's kitchen. In California when he was back on the West Coast, and they would talk about policy and advise him, and so they were his informal advisors. Well, one of the members of this kitchen cabinet was one of his oldest and closest friends. His name was Bloomingdale. I think it was Alfred Bloomingdale. He was the founder of the Bloomingdale department store chain. And in 84, 85, 86, Bloomingdale died of a heart attack. But he died of a heart attack on top of his girlfriend, with his wife sitting at home. And word got out. Well, later on, the public learned through the media that Reagan's initial go-to statement was, I barely knew that guy. We met a couple times, but he was nothing to me. And his advisors were like, everybody in the world knows that Alfred Bloomingdale, or whatever his first name was your best friend. And so the statement that they ended up coming out with was, he was my best friend. I'm sorry that he died this way. I feel sorry for his wife. What he did was wrong, but he was a good man and he was a good friend. It's like, yes, the truth shall set you free. It's as easy as that.
Yeah. It's,
just
there's
crazy.
like this, like if you ever saw Veep,
right?
It's a comedy sketch of like how things are. But then you see the way things happen now and you're like, is it that much different?
Fun fact, Veep ended as a show after winning 13 Emmy Awards. Do you know why? It ended because Donald Trump was elected president, and the craziness from that show turned out to be real life in the Trump administration, the first term. And so it just wasn't funny anymore. And so they canceled the show.
God.
Yeah.
That's funny as shit. Yeah.
Wow. Let me move on.
By the way, John, real fast.
Yes.
We never came back to that third tranche of emails.
You're
I don't
right.
want to leave people hanging. Should we do that real quick?
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, so you had asked me right at the beginning, what we could expect from this or whatever. And the one thing we can point to with evidence is that, and that was the part part of the part that left you speechless when you were here, which also, by the way, I'm glad it was wild for you because it was fucking wild for us.
It was crazy.
We were like, John Kiriakou not saying anything,
I
has
didn't
hell
even
frozen
know,
over.
Yeah, I didn't know how to respond. And I even said,
Yeah.
I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. So part of that was the fact that when they ran the data up by year of files, the chart basically is like beep, 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 beep. And the big drop off where everything's canceled is 1991 through 2001. But a lot of stuff was going on during those
Oh
years,
my
John.
God. Yes.
A lot of
1990.
stuff was
Oh
going
my
on.
God.
So I want to know a lot more about that because Jeffrey Epstein's artwork doesn't really help with that. You got Bill Clinton sitting there pointing in the blue dress, and then you got George W. Bush playing on the ground at the Oval with some falling over towers and a paper airplane like a child. And you're like, was that caricature or was that satire?
Right.
Or you know what I mean? Like what was that? So I would like to know if it's much more than that too. We have seen some of the people who I don't know if it's those files they've gotten access to. I'm talking about like Ro Khanna, Thomas Massey. I think Tim Burchett said something too. I don't know if it's the official files that haven't been released. That's a little unclear to me, but I've heard some spec commentary from them that's based, I shouldn't say spec. I've heard commentary from them that's based on things that are classified or at least were classified for a while that they saw that could point to other things that are beyond what we know. But like, I feel like that is the visual we used earlier with kind of pulling on the spring and then the whole well comes up. I feel like that third tranche is where the pull is. And I think that whatever's behind that is a civilizational, potential revolutionary type threat. It's bad enough that bread and circus and sitting on your iPhone and getting good TV shows and having the comfort of electricity and Wi-Fi and all these things we enjoy and take for granted these days isn't enough to keep you distracted enough to stay there and not walk outside. That's what might be in there.
What do you think the likelihood is then that there will be a whistleblower, that a brave member of Congress like Thomas Massey or Ro Khanna releases it into the congressional record as part of the speech and debate clause, that somebody leaks it to the Washington Post? What do you think the chances are that it's actually going to make its way out there and we see what this last 3 to 3.5 million pages really is?
This is pure spec because
Sure.
I can't. I don't know. This is just me kind of guesstimating, but the fact that it never has tells me even now it probably never will.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about can people keep a secret, which people do at a certain level have more of an ability to do that than we give them credit for. The old excuse, and I've used it before, and I've rethought this over the past year or two, of like, well, if enough people knew about it, it was someone's going to leak it or whatever. You don't account for tying up loose ends. You don't account for all the shit that you and I would never even occur to think about to solve a problem like that from a threat perspective or something. Well, maybe you would think about it, but I never would, Like it would be just movies and that kind of stuff to me. But, again, it's not a good omen when you see someone like Dan Bongino, who's got a very big microphone and has gone so hard, aggressively, angrily.
For example, Candace Owen. For a long time, I thought Candace Owen was a nut. And lately, I've been thinking, well, Candace Owen really talks some sense on some of these issues. Now, she still says some nutty things, like, I will never believe that the Egyptian Air Force killed Charlie Kirk, which has long been her position. I will never believe that Mrs. Macron is a man, which has long been her position. But on some of these other issues, she's really talking sense. So what responsibility do you think people like Candace or, Tucker Carlson or anybody who commands a large following have when talking about these big international issues?
Well, I'll just say as a brief caveat, because I during the Charlie Kirk stuff, I was like religiously watching her podcast. The only thing, I don't agree with her on everything either. Like, I don't believe that Stalin killed like 600 quadrillion Christians or whatever she claims. Right. which also Tucker kind of talks about that. I love both of them, but
Yeah.
let's be real. But the Egyptian plane, I think she's kind of saying like, oh, it's an Egyptian flagged plane, but maybe it's really an Israeli plane. I don't know. I'm not fully sure of whether she knows what she believes in regarding that story either with the planes. But the Israelis have done at least reconnaissance flights in previous wars where they've used planes that are either no markings or markings that resemble that of their own adversary. So I wouldn't be surprised if anything nowadays. But I think that Tucker, Candace, amazing. I hope Tucker, I heard Alex Jones this morning say that Tucker was named by Sebastian Gorka as being under this counterterrorism investigation.
Yeah.
How Sebastian Gorka got into that position, I have no idea. British agent, Israeli British agent, Ukrainian agent, I have no idea. But Tucker, I think, should take the opportunity, strike while the iron's hot, announce his candidacy for president. I would 1,000,000% support him, whatever that means for Tucker, probably nothing. But I think he needs to understand that a lot more Americans would support him than anyone else. And it's amazing. Someone like Tucker, a Fox News conservative his whole life. He's got me on his side. I'm a communist. He's got
Seriously.
George Galloway on his side. He's got everyone. He's got the libertarians. It's like, I don't know. I would love to see that. And obviously, I can't imagine what sort of a sacrifice that would be. But I think the ultimate goal of influencers, if they're talking about politics, should be to effect political change. And it's really kind of, I think, shameful when you have Americans on social media with big followings complaining so much and making so much money off of it in the process, but not doing anything really even slightly creative to try and
Oh my God.
change the system.
You're so right. You're so right. Blah, blah, blah. What's the whole purpose if you just sit in front of a camera every day and just say blah, 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 blah? It doesn't make any difference. I saw Tucker a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, you've got to run for president. You've got to. I said, I know that Glenn Greenwald talked to you about this a week ago. You've got to run for president, and if you do, I'm all in. I said, I'll do anything you want me to do. And I fully expected him to push back because I've said this to him before. This time was different. This time, and he might even tell me I'm looking too far into it. This time he didn't say no. He said, well, I like my life the way it is, and I don't think my wife would be happy if I ran for president, and my sons just got married, and he went on and on, but he didn't say no. So I'm hoping, man, I'm hoping for the best, because the system that we have in the United States is irretrievably broken. I said just the other day on a show that as recently as 100 years ago, we had like 6 viable political parties in the United States. 6. 150 years ago, if you were, let's say, a cabinet member or a senior member of Congress and you didn't like something that your party leadership did, you just switched parties. There were a half a dozen parties or more that you could switch to. Solomon P. Chase, who was the Secretary of the Treasury under Abraham Lincoln, was a member of 5 different political parties over the course of his career. Because every time they took a position that he disagreed with, he would just move to a different party, move to this party, move to that party. We had the Whigs, which became the Republicans, and then there were the radical Republicans and the conservative Republicans, and then the Democrats were the Southern Democrats and the anti-slavery Democrats. Okay, so why is it that the Libertarians always get 1% and the Greens always get 0.5%? It can't be because every American either loves the Republicans or loves the Democrats. I live here. I know that that's just simply not true. But we've convinced ourselves that the duopoly is the way to go, and it's not the way to go. It holds us back. And then we can't understand why in a good year, 50% of registered voters actually bother to go cast a vote. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like you, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I was a third-generation Democrat, and I left the Democratic Party because, in my view, it moved far too far to the right, especially on these issues of civil liberties and foreign policy and defense. And they might as well just be Republicans. All the stuff that the Democrats stand for today are things that Ronald Reagan advocated in the 1980s. And we thought he was so far extreme right-wing that he couldn't possibly get elected president. And then he won 49 states. And now he's so liberal by today's standards that he could never win a Republican nomination. And that's where the Democrats are today. So what about the rest of us that believe in, no war, full employment, labor unions? What about us? I don't like either one of these guys. And then what? I'm made to feel like an extremist? I'm a left-wing extremist? Give me a break. I'm mainstream. But the rest of them don't want to admit it. It's very frustrating. And Tucker said to me, he said, you and I probably disagree on fully half of the issues. I said, I don't care. I've known you for more than a decade. I trust you. And I know that every time your mouth opens to say something to me, you're telling me the truth. And that's what the country needs right now. Maybe I don't agree with it, but you're telling me the truth. So if you have any influence with Tucker Carlson, lay it on, man. Tell him his country needs him. Everybody else is.
That. I second that. Whoever hears, I told George Galloway. By the way, George said a very similar story to what you just said the last time I spoke to him about it. And I know Jimmy Dore was going to shoot him a text about it too. Not that he hasn't before, I know he has, but just reiterate, of course. So I second that. For anyone who has any sort of good friendship with Tucker, let's let him know that there is support from all corners of American political and apolitical life for him doing something like this. I mean, it'd just be so beautiful. And what a middle finger to those Sebastian Gorkas and Kash Patels and whoever else that are trying to go after him for saying that we shouldn't pursue proxy wars and war with Iran and whatever else. It's like, yeah, you want to do that? We're gonna make him president. If you want to try to do some BS counterterrorism, whatever charges, investigation, no, we're gonna make him president. Actually,
amen to that.
That's what I hope for.
Amen to that. That's exactly what I hope for. I will say, he used to live, of course, here in Washington. Well, no, I'm not in Washington now. He used to live in Washington, and left during COVID. Moved to New England, built a little house, and has lived happily ever after. And I asked him once. I said, "Why all the way up here?" He lives way out in the woods. And he said that it was his favorite place from childhood. He always loved it. He's an avid fly fisherman, so he goes fishing almost every day, and and his family loves it. And I think he would be reluctant to come back to Washington. But maybe if we're able to convince him that his country needs him, we can get him to make that decision. That would be pretty good.
Look, Nixon had the Western White House in San Clemente, California.
Yes, he did.
On the beaches just north of Camp Pendleton. That's where I grew up. I remember visiting it when I was a kid. Tucker can have his northeastern White House or something.
That's it.
Or he grew up in Carlsbad. He can actually go back to Nixon's old Western White House if it's not privately owned.
I'll tell you what, there are very few places in the United States that I would like to live more than Carlsbad.
Yeah. Yeah. Carlsbad. All of that area is just, I think, some of the most pristine pieces of beachfront that we have in America. But
yeah.
John, if I have time, can I ask you one more question? I don't know.
Please.
If
go right ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I've heard you say, speaking about your youth, we were talking about Tucker's youth, speaking about your youth, you say that you were just infatuated with Middle Eastern poetry and culture and things like this. I definitely have come to learn about that stuff. I wasn't interested from my youth or anything. And you said that that's what led you to pursue I believe it was not just Arabic language, but did you also pursue Arabic studies?
Yes, I got a degree in Middle Eastern Studies. And it's funny, at George Washington University, it was a relatively new degree program. I was one of only 4 students in it, in a student body of, 30,000+ people. And I went to the dean, and I said, I had a complaint about the program. The political studies are great, but there's no requirement to study Islam or oil economics, and that just didn't make any sense to me. And he said, "Don't tell me how to run my program, kid." So he seriously did. So George Washington University was part of something called the DC Consortium, or the Consortium of DC Universities. And I found an oil economics class at Georgetown University. So I took oil economics at Georgetown. And then a year later, GW hired Syed Hossein Nasr, the father of Vali Nasr, who used to be, well, he was the Shah of Iran's last chief of staff, but politics aside, he was one of the greatest thinkers in contemporary Shiism. And so I studied under him for the next 2 years. I remember the first class that I took from him, he assigned 12 books on Islam, and he had written all 12 of them, which just impressed the heck out of me. He's still alive. He's something like 98 years old and living here in the United States. But he opened up a whole new world for me. And also, I was very fortunate in that when I was a freshman, Iranian students who had fled the revolution were juniors and seniors. When I was a senior, we were getting the refugees from the Lebanese Civil War. So I was surrounded by Muslims in that program. I learned so much from them about the culture, about the language, about the religion. I couldn't get enough. I've said too in podcasts, I told my parents when I was 9 years old that I wanted to be a spy when I grew up. Mm-hmm. And they thought that was cute, and they bought me walkie-talkies for Christmas. My brother and I would run around the neighborhood talking to each other on the walkie-talkies. But when I was 16 years old, I told my father specifically that I wanted to be a spy in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And he was like, still with the spy stuff, can't you be a dentist or something? I said, Dad, I really want to be a spy and I want to live in the Middle East. He thought I was nuts. And then I ended up being a spy in the Middle East.
The main question I wanted to ask you about that was like, with that profound love and appreciation of these different cultures and stuff, how did your career, I guess, I don't know the best way to phrase this. Like, for example, when I visit countries that seem, or parts of countries that seem like well within the hands of the bad guys, the American adversaries,
yes.
I go to those places and in many instances it feels like you're in the heart, right? Yes. You're in the heart of the country, like in Sana'a or in Sada in Yemen. Whereas maybe if I was elsewhere in the country, it might feel very different. It might feel like the culture has been lost.
Yes.
It might feel like ISIS or Al-Qaeda or affiliates are running things. And same could be said, I think, about other countries that have gone through color revolutions and things like this in the past. And I've listened to a lot of your stories, and while, I fully support taking out like Al-Qaeda, and I fully support taking out Daesh and these other affiliated groups across the world, JNIM and Boko Haram, whoever, did it ever, like, I guess, counter kind of your love and appreciation for the sovereign cultures of these countries with maybe what others in the agency or others in the Pentagon were doing, outside of just the sheer power of war, but about the stripping of the sovereignty of these cultures?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's actually an important question. For a very long time, I truly believed we were the good guys. I really did. And I thought, well, we're on the side of right, we're on the side of human rights. I mean, this was the narrative during the Clinton administration, for example, that we're on the side of human rights. And it wasn't until 9/11 that I realized how false that narrative was. And it continued. I remember going to Yemen. I've been to Yemen 5 times, and every time, I mean, between 1990 and 2011, and every time I go, it's worse than it is on the previous trips. But I remember going to Yemen the first time. There were 2 Yemens. There was northern Yemen called the Yemen Arab Republic, and then there was PIDRI, the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. And they were so excited because they were unifying that April. And people were literally dancing in the streets. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life, literally dancing in the streets. And then you fast forward, a decade, and they've shot Scud missiles at one another, and there are, armed conflicts all around the country, and they don't produce food anymore because they're all raising gat, and the country's just a
I love the cons.
Yeah, I know. It takes getting used to. I didn't like it so much.
And the honey.
The honey's awesome. Yes. But, it made me realize we're seriously on the wrong side of so many of these issues. When I was there in 2009, I was the chief investigator on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I went to do a study. And I was talking to the U.S. Defense Attaché, and he was bragging to me about all the money that he was spending on what he called a PSYOPs program, a psychological operations program. And I said, well, what's the operation? And he said, well, the operation is that we're sponsoring a talk show on a radio station geared toward young men. And we play jazz, and then they're able to call in and comment on the jazz. And I looked at him and I said, Colonel, with all due respect, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. What are you doing? You're spending the American taxpayers' money running a jazz show in Sana'a. They can't eat. They don't have shoes for their children. And you're spending money on a jazz show? And he looked at me like I was crazy. But it's just like people in government just don't get it. This is another thing. This is an affliction of Washington, D.C., is we all think we are so smart, that we're the smartest people in the world, and everybody else is an idiot, and they need to have everything explained to them. So, this guy's position was, he came up with an idea to put an hour-long jazz show on some random radio station in Sana'a, and he expected everybody to applaud him. Like, he couldn't imagine why would this guy from Washington come in here and tell me my business that it's a bad idea to have a jazz show in Sana'a? But that's Washington. When I was working for John Kerry, I saw it every single day, literally every day, where John Kerry believed he was smarter than you, and he was smarter than me, and smarter than everybody else. And so every time he would come up with a stupid idea, he would expect people to nod and clap and say, congratulations, Mr. Chairman, that's an act of genius. No, actually it's not. It's a stupid idea. There it is.
But he did shift his opinion on his friendship with Assad, as you told a story about. But even that, it's like, is that really? I mean, I know it was a different time, Duma allegations.
Sure.
Okay, but is that really like as simple as it is for some of these people in D.C.?
Oh, yes,
you can say, hey, don't talk to that guy anymore.
Oh my gosh, yes. What you're referring to is one of only 2 times that I gave John Kerry unsolicited advice on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I said to him one day, Senator, you have got to stop calling Bashar al-Assad my dear friend. I said, every Lebanese in Washington is calling me, and they're asking me, what is your boss doing calling Bashar al-Assad my dear friend? And he said to me, we rode motorcycles together to the Golan Heights, and we really bonded. And I said, and I'm sure that's true, but you can't call him my dear friend in public. It's a bad look. And he's like, all right. And I don't even know if he listened, but yeah, that's just how they are, because they're smarter than we are.
Motorbikes with Assad to Golan Heights. I can't imagine the stories, but wow. Well, yeah, I always thought about that earlier question I had for you, because I'm like, the way you talk, you learned Arabic, You do have such a deep appreciation that we can all see. And I'm like, I look at these agencies today that operate, outside of the shadows, in the light, and I just look at them. I'm like, I don't think any of these people appreciate the thousands of years old cultures that they're bombing right now, or trying to influence in some way and turn into what we have in Syria now. Some of the oldest cities on the face of the earth, and now they're hosting like these weird Nicki Minaj basketball games for Jolani.
Yes.
I don't even know what Syria is anymore.
I've got to tell you, I had dinner with a senior Turkish government official, I'm going to say 4 or 5 weeks ago. Senior level. He was in Washington. He reached out to me and said he wanted to take me to dinner and talk about foreign policy from the perspective of an informed private citizen. I said, great. How do you turn that down? So as soon as we sat down, I said, listen, before we talk, you got to get out of Cyprus. You just have to get out of Cyprus. There can't be peace anywhere in the region while you're in Cyprus. He says, okay, all right. That's not what I wanted to talk about. I said, okay, I'm happy to talk about whatever you want, but you have to get out of Cyprus. So we got to the point of talking about Syria. And I said to him, because I'm an idiot sometimes, I said, Jolani, this guy has to be a CIA asset, right? He has to be. I mean, he comes out of nowhere. He's the former co-founder of ISIS, Daesh, whatever you want to call it. He's a former senior commander of Al-Qaeda. He appears to be installed in the presidency of Syria practically overnight, just like that. And then the very next day, the president of the United States congratulates him and lifts all sanctions. I said, that just has CIA written all over it. He has to be CIA. And the guy laughed and he said, no, he's ours. Turkish National Intelligence Organization. We created him from nothing, and we installed him in Syria. I said, you know what? That actually makes more sense. But yeah, he proudly, gladly just came out with it that Jolani is a Turkish asset, which I thought was quite dramatic and utterly believable.
Yeah. I remember Max Blumenthal and Management of Savagery, his amazing book everyone should read. He talked a lot about the rat lines of weapons that they were running to those guys in Syria, and how when they'd get injured, they'd go right across the border into Turkey and be treated for whatever injuries they had. Then they'll go back to, eventually they'll find themselves in Idlib, and they're running these like giant, whatever it is, fuel, drugs, whatever it is, running stuff and making money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's funny because the Turks have this odd relationship with the Kurds. Like, they're okay with the Iraqi Kurds, kinda. They don't at all like the Syrian Kurds. They actively hate their own Kurds, but then they're willing to sort of deal with everybody else. It's a tenuous situation there. I want to add one other thing about Syria. The first time I ever went to Syria, I was preparing to go to Syria for the very first time. It was 1992, I think. And Hafez al-Assad was the leader of Syria at the time. And my boss said to me, so Syria, huh? And I said, yeah, I'm excited to go to Syria. I've never been to Syria before. And he said, yeah, it's going to be pretty great, but you're never going to actually meet another Syrian, and you'll certainly never see the inside of a Syrian's home. I said, okay, whatever. So I go, and surveillance was very heavy. When I say very heavy, I mean like comically heavy, where I'm walking down the street and the car from the Syrian intelligence service is driving at 2.5 miles an hour alongside of me. Finally, I turn, I'm like, guys, come on. I'm just going to go to the restaurant over here. You're welcome to join me, which they did, I might add. But anyway, I went to the souk, to the bazaar, because I wanted to buy one of these famous Damascus tablecloths that everybody was raving about. I wanted to give it to my mother. And so I go, and the guy asks me, "Anta min wayn? Where are you from?" I said, "Min al-Wilayat al-Mutahida," from the United States. And he gasps. And I thought he was going to like run screaming from the room and pull down the grate and close the shop. He had just never met an American before. The guy was like in his 50s. He had never met an American. An hour later, I'm in his kitchen with his wife and his kids, and she's covering the table in food. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences I ever had. I found the Syrians to be kind and fun and highly educated and just all around wonderful people. They live in a terrible neighborhood, and they're victims of, great power machinations.